Hi, thank you. My name is Victor Reyes, and I spent 15 years as a public defender and then 15 years as a district judge in the 10th Judicial District here in Colorado. So I currently live in Pueblo, which is in southern Colorado. I really deeply appreciate this opportunity to share in something that I think is so important for us as judicial officers, as lawyers, to really start thinking about very seriously, as the impacts on our health and our well-being can be very serious if we don't get control of some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. This training on secondary trauma and mitigating its effects, is this discussion, which I'm hoping we have through the Q&A, is something that I never had as a lawyer. As a young public defender, you're given a bunch of files, you're off and running. And for years, was told to tough it up, suck it up, and then used humor, dark humor, gallows humor, and in my case, eating too much, to deal with the stresses of the work. And it had such an impact not only on me, but on my family, my children, and those around me, which I think this is why it's so important that we begin to have this discussion. So when we look at this idea about, does our work impact our community? Absolutely, it does. And it does in a large number of ways. And I think that we can even spend a few minutes having that discussion. But most specifically, we impact every level of a free society. And we're impacting people's lives. It's generational. And then there's a lot deeper impacts that we have as far as even, in a way, holding our society together, which is through the rule of law, procedural fairness, procedural justice, and holding systems accountable, holding the state accountable, holding people accountable. So when we start looking at the incredible responsibility that is placed on our shoulders related to our communities and related to the people who we serve, you start looking at this next question. And feel free in the Q&A to just think about this even out loud for a second. You know, what stressors are unique to working in the judicial system? So when we look at the fact of that we're taking in information, we're using all our senses. We're bringing ourselves, that person who happens to be existing in that moment, to the table every day, just living our lives. And then you add on top of that, this work that we've chosen to do, that's work that for many years, for many of us, we didn't think twice about what it was doing to us, that we can start thinking as to what impact that that it has on us personally. So when I start looking at this impact of the work on the community, we basically change the course of people's lives. We affect how our community perceives justice. Then all of a sudden, we are the ones who, we're standing up, we're making arguments, we're writing briefs, we're listening to evidence that may be recorded, we're seeing photos, we're seeing interviews, we're seeing things that basically no human being should have to see, and no human being should ever have to live through, as and that's our job. And a lot of times, just the moment in our lives things like this become overwhelming are sometimes, for some of us, some of the darkest moments. So when we look at this idea of secondary trauma, one of the first questions I need to ask myself is, do I need to be healed? Or for me, I had to take out the words do, and I had to say to myself, I need to be healed. There's some stuff going on with me. The way I'm feeling is not healthy. The way I'm looking is not healthy. The way I'm at times thinking is not healthy. One of the comparisons that I like to talk about is how I feel inside and how my mind is working is this idea of the globe. We've all seen these globes, and you look inside, and I don't know how many of you at the end of the day feel that not only your mind, your brain is in this kind of fog, but then we also are in a physical fog, so to speak. So when I start looking at this idea, when I personally started looking at this idea that there's things going on, I need to be healed, then I had to ask myself, what do I need to be healed from? And the third question that is also extremely important is, how do I start this process of healing, and how do I continue this process? Because a lot of us can recognize that I had a tough day. I had to look at some, horrible things. I had to look at horrible pictures. I had to listen to some very, very stressful testimony, or I had to make some very important decisions. And so how do I deal with that? Well, I just want to be quiet. Maybe I need a drink. Maybe I need to just do something to feel like I needed to get it out of my system. But one thing that I had to realize, and I'm just coming from my perspective as somebody who went through what you're going through in many ways, and had many of the same experience. I was a general jurisdiction judge, so I saw everything. And as a public defender, I saw everything. But I took that attitude of I've seen and done everything and created almost like a badge of honor, that nothing, affects me because I've done it all. I've seen it all, blah, 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 blah. And I've heard that from judges around the country as we've done this discussion. So when we are looking at this idea of trauma, we start looking at it in different ways. So I am kind of done something here that I didn't mean to do. So I'm going to go ahead and Jen, if you can just move that for a second, please.
I can't move the slide. It's on your computer.
Oh, no. So, yeah. Oh, here we go. I think I finally accomplished what I need to accomplish. So, so when we look at the impact of our work on us, we're talking about stress. We're talking, and stress comes from different levels, and the stress is inherent in the work that we do. It's inherent in what we see and hear and do every day. And when we start talking about things like PTSD, what you're starting to talk about is basically one of the definitions as you go through the DSM is that, if you've been in a stressful situation for more than 60 days, I believe it is, then you are entering into the world of, 30 days, that you're entering into the world of PTSD. And I'm quite confident that many of the participants here have been attorneys for longer than 30 days. It impacts our what's called our empathetic fatigue. This was known as compassion fatigue in the past, but this idea of compassion is a whole other talk. And what Jen and I are touching on for the next 45 minutes or so is really, one of many discussions that we are having with attorneys, court personnel, judges, and other people who work in the system throughout the country. And this idea of burnout is overwhelming on us. And I remember Bill Greenhall, who was my criminal law teacher at Georgetown, said, you don't do this public defender stuff for more than 5 years, you get yourself out. And And, I did it for 15. So, we all reach that point of even burning out, then kind of something happens, we get rejuvenated, but there's still those residual effects. It affects not only our personal relationships, but also our professional relationships. So when we look at the type of cases that are traumatic for judges and court-related personnel, the research shows that these are the ones that serve as some very serious triggers. Those of us who handle DV cases, child abuse cases, homicides, I'm sure, with your communities being as small as they are, I live in a town of about 107,000 people, it's easy to drive through town, but when I drive through town, when I point out landmarks, it usually relates to some crime that I either was representing somebody on or presided over. And that kind of gives you an inkling of my mental state's not exactly the best place. And these are the landmarks that I see as I drive through my community. And then, we've done research on judges related to this. And at least 42% of the judges who had been on the bench longer than 7 years had symptoms of secondary trauma. It seems that, the idea of being affected by the work is not only limited to lawyers and judges in the United States, but there's actually United Nations Office of Drug and Crime report on judicial well-being that 76% of those judges felt there was insufficient time to maintain physical and mental well-being. 92% indicated that the work brought them stress, either sometimes, frequently, or always. So when we start talking about this idea of trauma and the effects, we're human beings. We're human beings who are hearing awful things that have happened to other human beings. We have to make decisions as strategic ones, as lawyers, and then ones which have finality as judges. So, the effect is going to be universal. So and I'm currently the judge in residence for the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. I encourage folks who aren't familiar with that organization to do anything related to families or children or juveniles to look into this organization. And we have a Juvenile and Family Court Journal in July of 2019. The entire journal was dedicated to this idea of trauma, specifically as it related to judges, but there was also information there related to lawyers. So we, some of the conclusions or some of, what was drawn out from these articles was that, there are strategies, that we can do to mitigate and increase our resilience, but it's completely up to us to, I think, first, I had to do it after denying it for years, even if I was listening to talks on this issue of secondary trauma. But I had to finally admit that I was actually being very affected by the work I did. And that effect for me came, like I said earlier, in the form of eating. I mean, sugar was my drug. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but I sure do like sugar. And that was, my drug of choice that had me balloon up to 260 pounds and going to the doctor and giving them the option that I can die of a heart attack or I can die of a stroke was, it shook my world. It really shook the foundations of what was going on in my life, especially when I had small children. And then we look at, articles that are related specifically to attorneys. And I would encourage you to take a look at that because the findings basically talk about the exposure to the clients, their issues, and the effects it has on us. There also have been research that's done with judges that the biggest impact is decision-making. One of the biggest impacts is decision-making on judges. But I think that also shows a failure of judges to actually recognize the impact of what they're seeing and hearing on them. So as we go through this, our brains start taking, a different path. And I don't know how many of you have felt this way at one point or another during your careers. Because I know, sure enough, they didn't cover in school for me to sit down with an 18-year-old and on a homicide case that was a pretty open and shut homicide, and convince this, child at 40 years in prison for this, robbery that, for what he was looking at, which was life, was something that that should be considered. And then bringing in his father in from prison to sit down in the jail and convince him to take the deal because the kid was scared to death. That's something I didn't learn in law school. I don't know if you took that class in dealing with other human beings' lives. But how many times have we gone through this? And then, this kind of happens to our brain if we don't put in some healthy type of remedies that we'll be discussing in a second. So, what we're going to, so when we look at this idea of occupational hazard, Jen, what are your experiences?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. What's great is that you are not alone. It says that right on the slide. And all of what Judge Reyes is talking about is admitting that we need the healing, that there are tools to learn, and that when we ask ourselves, how are we really doing? Not just fine, good, right? The canned response. If we really step back and go, wow, like I'm not handling my stress probably how I should. And how do we get out of the habit of triaging, right? Where we're just like in the habit of, oh, I'm bleeding, quick Band-Aid. And usually those are not really healthy habits. So how do we pull off the Band-Aid and learn to stop the bleeding in a healthy way? So getting ahead of it. And part of that is admitting I need some healing, I need some strategy, I need some new life-saving tools that can help me deal with, so that I am in my center and coming from a good place. So since COVID and the Zoom capability, I've been able to reach farther and wider, and both Judge Reyes and I have been team teaching on Zoom or in person now, but when it was all on Zoom, it was great because I could reach out to not just judges, but everyone under the courtroom roof. So, their entire team. So now I do monthly meetings with the entire team on Zoom where we come together and we do breath work. And I am starting to teach them visualization or short meditation, how to do these little things that are life-saving when you're in the heat of a moment and stress is just right. And so some other ones that I've been working with is, how do I help prep witnesses? How do I get them to learn how to breathe, center, focus, right? Your group, the attorneys, the international forensic nurses, I'm working with them, the International Chief of Police, the International Alliance for Hope. I don't know if you know that organization, but that is run and created by Casey Quinn, who's an attorney, and now he's reached out to me, and now I'm training his staff so that they can then go out to the camps for the kids and help train them in these techniques, like I said, that are life-saving, that help you get into your body, help you to regulate your breath so that you can sleep. It's just incredible. He also started not only the summer camp Hope, but the family justice centers all across United States. I think he's in 45 states now. So that has been an incredible ride along with him. And then just thinking about in your own communities, during COVID, I was teaching yoga and breath work to the shelters of abused and neglected kids, and it's just, the big part is showing up for yourself, showing up for your team, who you're working with, and just really seeing all of this as a whole picture, not just, we get so kind of in the blinders of just self, and it's a bigger picture than that. And how we start to show up, that energy starts to ripple and then ripple and ripple. And if you imagine me running around working with the witnesses and the attorneys and the judges and everybody, the probation officers, pretty soon that ripple effect is going to reach everybody, and we can start to have a healing, more positive space and place to do our jobs. And so that big piece, you are not alone, right? We're all under this roof together. The first part is just admitting, maybe I can start to embody some of these practices today. And with that said, I'm going to teach you right now. We're going to do what I always say. You don't remember anything else from Jen, the wellness girl. Remember to take 5 deep breaths, but you've got to do it right. And so when I meet people, it's so interesting. And, you know, myself included, back when I was learning how to breathe properly, I didn't know how to breathe properly in the way that could really ground me and get me back in my body and to be calm and centered, to be able to focus, you know? So I think it's important. I think that's the one thing I always say, please remember, it's like stop, drop, and roll. If you're in a fire, stop, drop, and breathe, but do it correctly. So we're gonna do 5 deep breaths. I love this one. I teach it a lot to everyone, anyone who wants to learn it. It's called Ujjayi, and it just means victorious breath. And to learn how to create the sound, I always say we hold up one of our hands about, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches away, so that you can feel the heat of your breath. And so sit up nice and tall. And what we're going to do is we're going to inhale the breath in through the nose, big full breath. And on the exhale, we're going to say, and you're going to fog the mirror. So if you were actually fogging a mirror, you would feel the heat on the hand, right? Now breathe in again. Exhale. Do it again. Exhale. Of course, we're going to do 5. That's the 5 rule. Inhale again. Last one together. Big inhale. Exhale. Release the hand. And what's important is that when we inhale, yes, we're making that sound. We're learning to make that sound. I like to say it's like the sound of the ocean. It's a very like white noise, a very meditative sound, which is calming. And it just helps us to feel the strength of the breath. And then you want to inhale a count of 3 and exhale a count of 3. So if I inhale, I start low in my belly, that's 1. I bring it up to my diaphragm, 2, and I fill up my chest, 3. Then I exhale, 3, 2, 1. Like right away, if I was there, I would be listening to you breathing. And some people would have this big inhale and itty bitty exhale, or the opposite effect. So in order to regulate the breath, we need to even it out. So go ahead and you can place your hands like this, one over the other, thumb tips together. Now you're about 2 inches from your belly button. Bring your hands, that's your center. And when you feel the heat of your hands, the pressure of your hands, right? You can close your eyes, and we're going to breathe in, and I'm just going to count 1. Breathe in, 2, 3, exhale. And you can keep your mouth open or close it, but I'm still making that nice ocean sound. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, exhale, 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It's almost like snoring. 1 more, inhale, exhale. Just check in with yourself and just see how you're feeling, right? I love this. What you breathe in, you believe in. So what you breathe in, what you take in, you believe in. And the other one is the breath is a language that the body understands. And I love breathing techniques. So that's just the first one that we're going to do today. And when we can get into our breath, we get into our bodies, we can shift our perception. We can think a little clearer. And so I think it's very important to grasp how to breathe correctly right away and remember it. So, and that's it for that one, Judge Reyes. can't push the button there. Thank you.
Thanks. Jen has had 23 years of experience working with judges through the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges. She currently has established her own practices. Outside of that, she's no longer with the organization. But so, I mean, when she says this about, here's the breath girl, this is a person who's actually been in court, logging cases, watching, dealing with judges for 23 years. These are the techniques that I was using as this started playing out in my life, this idea of stress and trauma. So, we're talking about here is a continuum. And when we have stressful events in our lives, and what we've talked, we spent a little time at the beginning was, do I need healing, or I need healing? And then now we're going to talk about a little bit of from what. So this idea of secondary trauma, it's basically the impact resulting from the knowledge of traumatizing events of others. And, our entire life, since, if you think about it, since law school, as we're reading cases, then some of us have done clinics, and then as we get into whatever career path we decide, as we start interacting with other human beings, all we are hearing is their traumatic events over and over and over again. As we, the months, days, months, and years roll along, it weighs on us. And we really, judges live in a sense of isolation. And we've been doing discussions with judges all over the country, and their concern is the fact that they can't talk to anybody. And if they do talk to somebody about something bothering them, then they're looked as weak. Just like a lawyer, I would imagine, would be concerned. I was concerned that I wouldn't be the tough public defender in my office, especially when I'm told to suck it up. And then, as a judge, all of a sudden, somebody's campaigning against you, saying, you're not tough enough. This judge is a weak person. You need tough judges. Or as a lawyer who's just trying to toughen through things and muscle through things, I'm not dealing with what I'm seeing. So over the course of time, there are different effects. We have, physical, of course, there's emotional effects. And these effects they stay with us. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to be driving by scenes of crimes or incidents, and you'll tell somebody, oh, this is where this happened. Or you'll see that picture or remember that young person or that child that was testifying, and out of nowhere, something will trigger it. And we start doing as a human being, we start paralleling the experience of people we see around us. We have what are called mirror neurons. And then we start normalizing these feelings and these reactions. Like was just mentioned, the whole idea is not, we need to make sure that we stay in touch with our humanity, and it impacts the way we see the world. My children, when they were smaller, we didn't do sleepovers at anybody's house. Why? Because I had read way enough reports or had enough cases where there was the drunk uncle who lived in the house, or the drunk dad who made his way down to the basement or to the room where the children or the child was going to the bathroom and somebody walked in. So my children were not allowed to go over to somebody else's house to have a sleepover, because of my perception of what the world was like in every other household based upon what I was experiencing. And so what do we, so there are many factors that influence our vulnerability to this trauma, to the secondary trauma, that mitigate our resilience to that trauma. We have our individual factors, and this is what we've grown up. This is who we are. These are all those life experiences we've had, positive and negative, that brings us to a certain moment, and that moment is dealing with what I'm dealing in front of you. Then you've got the life situation factors. What's happening in my in my home, with my marriage, with my children. There are several judges that I've met who are running drug courts who have had a hard time dealing with the fact that their own children had become addicted as they, when they were in their later years, and a couple of which whose children died of overdoses while they're trying to deal with people in their own courtrooms fighting the same demons that they're being fought in their home in a way of, and maybe in what was explained to me in a silent way. And then you got organizational factors, like what's going on with my work environment, what's happening in the courthouses, the workload that I'm dealing with. So all of these factors come together, and every time we wake up, every situation that we're in, this is everything that we're bringing to our table. And then there's common reactions to violence and trauma. And if people are familiar with the adverse childhood experiences, the ACE study that was done years ago, I look at these and I call these an ACE test for judges and lawyers. We have physical reactions and ramifications, eating problems, chest pains. I was just in Florida, and one of the lawyers came up and was a defense lawyer. I'm sorry, one of the judges came up who was a defense lawyer, and he starts talking about suffering a heart attack right before opening argument on a death penalty case because the stress had overwhelmed him so much. Then we have the fog, the difficulties in thinking, these ability, this lack of concentration. This idea of suicide really hits me very hard because there are several members of the public defender's office when I was there back from the 80s and 90s who are no longer with us because of the psychological effects that resulted from the work that they did, where they've taken their own lives. And I'm quite confident with 83 people sitting here sharing this space together that some of us here can also relate to these types of experiences. And then we have the feelings that arise that come out of this, this feeling of vulnerability, of nervousness. I'm not myself. I've lost who I am. And then behaviors. It was interesting. We were just in Florida with 440 circuit judges doing a wellness plenary for entire morning. And one of the things that the justice brought up during one of our subsequent meetings was the amount of judicial grievances and lawyer grievances where being overwhelmed by, we know what the ethics rules are. We know that we can't take this number that's going to be given us at the end and share it with anybody, and then they get an ethics credit for it. We know the rules. But there's a tendency, at times, maybe it's an ego-based thing, but there's a tendency when we're so overwhelmed with what's happening that we take on some dangerous, sometimes career-risking behaviors. And when we track it back to what's really happening to me, it may track back to this idea of being overwhelmed, what I'm seeing and hearing. So then we've got these symptoms. They can be long-term, they can be short-term. This whole idea of sleeplessness, during trials. I always I thought it was cool to keep a notepad next to me because if I had ideas during the night, I would jot them down. Well, once I jotted down that idea, that led to a bunch of stuff. And then next thing you know, I'm not sleeping. And then we have the abuse of substances. And we're not limited to this. I mean, this is things that overwhelm people in the medical profession, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, inability to maintain our relationships, and of course this loss in faith in our humanity. Then on top of all this stuff that's happening to us, we throw on COVID-19. And when our homes were our sanctuaries, that's where I went after work. Now our home is not so much my sanctuary. Number one, I was, before COVID, I'm bringing home work because why? Because it's all on my computer. When I was a judge, when I was a lawyer, how much work I could bring home was limited to the size of the briefcase that I owned at that moment. Now that's not true. We could bring our whole library in our little laptop. And how many, I remember this being a huge deal with a lawyer said, "Hey, Judge, you were up at 1:30." I said, "How do you know that?" "Well, the date stamp on the order that you signed, just, dismissing the case, was at 1:30 a.m. What are you doing up?" And it's like, okay, well, message to Victor. It's like, people are noticing. And then this whole thing with our home being our sanctuary. How many of you, when you were doing hearings from home, scowled your background to make sure nobody could tell where your home was, anything about your family, anything at all about you as you were, doing your hearings? And then there's all these other things that disconnected us with human beings. And before we switched to the next part, which will be what can I do? What tools that Jen will lead us in. This is me in 2010 in the middle of People versus Paul Stark. It was this horrible rape murder of a teenager by a neighbor who then dragged her body, took the body in the back of a truck, dumped it in a field right next to his home. And the press had asked me if they could take pictures, and the answer was yes, with the caveat that when they took a picture, she had to stand up. She couldn't use a clicker, because I want to know when pictures were being taken. So when this photo was taken, at that moment, the photographer, she had stood up and she was taking a picture. So when I look at this, this is the best I could muster in the middle of Paul Stark's murder trial, knowing that a photograph was taken. And I use this as an example because I knew where my life was and my head was in 2010, and then where I went in 2014 when I did People versus Bruce Nozzolino, which was 2.5 months long. But by then I'd engaged in a lot of these practices that we're going to be sharing. Well, I'm going to say maybe a minuscule amount of the practices that we're going to be sharing, because there's a lot more practices that we hope to share with you in the future. But I know that I was a different judge. I was a different human being 4 years later. And it was because of this idea of finally actually taking care of myself.
What is wellness? It's kind of like the word of self-care. We feel that they're getting overused and it's becoming dilute. But for me, when I think of wellness, and you can think of what is wellness for you, it's living in a balance of what you are physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's taking you as a whole and finding the balance between all parts of your bodies, right? I say bodies, but we're in one body. And it's important that we consider each one of those. So important. I also just want to say, like, what is mindfulness? When you're truly mindful, you are conscious of what you're going to say, how your words are going to come out, what you do, how you're behaving. When you're mindless, I always say you've turned into the robot. You've gone on autopilot, right? And you can't really know how you're feeling. I get this experience so many times with the breath. I immediately can listen to the breathing. Is it shallow? Is it forced? Are you holding your breath and not even realizing that you're holding your breath? Sometimes we don't realize that we're making a face and that we wear it. We wear our energy on us. Another thing is your posture. If you're slumped in the chair, it's like, wow, I just can barely get up enough energy to be present. It says a lot about you. And especially when I recently did a podcast for the attorneys and the witnesses through Court Sciences. And I was talking about, right, all eyes on you. You come through into a courtroom, there's a presence, there's an energy. If you're dragging and you're dehydrated and you're not mentally clear and you haven't gotten into your breath and you're not fully present, like, there's such a difference between this and this. And when you show up, you shine. And it's just an incredible difference. And that people notice. And that is the beginning of being and feeling well, and recognizing that we count too. I mean, it really does start with you from the minute your eyes open. And I always say, don't just pop out of bed and run and get your coffee and just do that robotic, mindless routine. We get the chance to try every morning when our eyes pop open. First of all, so grateful to be alive, right? And then to think about, wow, what is my day going to look like? And we'll go over intention setting in a little bit. But just really knowing how to change your habits, get into healthier habits so that your day starts on the right foot. Another thing that I love to share with this is really helps us want to continue to do our job and have a love for doing the job and serving and helping people in the best that we can, is that we need to learn to give from our overflow, not from this empty well. So if we're actually doing these practices, we're eating healthy, we're getting the sleep, we're hydrating, we're doing the things that self-care us, we are adding in, filling up this well full until it can overflow. We really don't have any business helping anyone. We can't even help ourselves. So how in the world are we supposed to show up for the vulnerable populations that put all their trust and hope in you? So important. So, and also keeping you in your practice, doing your job to the best of your ability for as long as you want to. I love that, longevity. And if you can turn it, thank you. Is this back to you or me? I had it for me. Coping and preventative strategies, it's me. Good. I love this. Primary prevention before it actually starts. So I was saying earlier, when do we stop triaging ourselves, just throwing on the Band-Aid and just busting through to get through something and coping with alcohol or these different abusive things that we're actually tearing down and removing from the well? There's now nothing left in the well. How do we start to create change and become an agent of change? And that really comes down to self-love, loving yourself first, and carving out the time. I was working with a chief judge from Atlanta, and she was just saying, wow, now that I've learned these practices and spent time with you, I come in once a month and do these things with her court team for like half an hour. It's a lunch thing. And she's like, now like my HR issues are balancing out, like just that's that ripple effect of when we can all do these practices, we can start to create these positive habits. Everything starts to shift. You wake up, you have this new routine. I just really love that. And I think it's important. That's before the problem starts, right? And identifying it, admitting it, not compartmentalizing it. We get into that habit. That's so easy. Not going to go there. That's going in drawer number 52 back there. Not healthy. We want to choose times that work for us. So I always suggest this right when we wake up. Maybe as we are doing coffee, maybe when we're driving to work, we can go over a few of the things. Maybe you get a break during the day and before you go to sleep at night. I call these times of day easy buttons, and they don't take long. I promise you to take 5 deep breaths to get in your body and quiet your mind. It's minutes, right? We have to just start choosing ourselves. So I think that's really important. Okay. Thank you. This I have is you. Am I wrong? To Andreas?
So when we talk about this idea of the vicarious, we can't eliminate it. It's going to be there. We're going to have a great possibility of having secondary trauma just because of the nature of the work. So when we start looking at this, we need to start becoming more aware. What are the things that trigger me? Several years ago, I had a colleague, when we went to the National Criminal Defense College in Macon, have the realization that they couldn't do certain cases because they had a breakdown in the middle of the training because that case fact pattern was their life. And they never did that type of case again. And so we need to also look at this idea of when we talk about spiritual connections or connections, find more meaning outside of ourselves and also maintain compassion to ourselves. We need an awareness of our needs, balance our activities, and connect deeper to ourselves, those around us, and even for some of us, something greater. So this is kind of a rhetorical question, but things to really think about. And what I did do is I did forward the PDF of these slides. So I'm hoping that they'll get distributed. But this slide I think is very important, is to look at our strategies. What have I learned from other people? What do I tell colleagues who aren't reaching out? How do I help them? And what advice do I give to a new person who's starting this job as to how to deal with these things in the future? So it's just some of the suggestions from this, the National Council's journal had to do with, greater support, more training on recognizing the signs, taking days off, not meaning, and actually taking days off and working through, and creating these support systems.
So I'm going to go quickly because we're always running out of time. Judge Reyes and I were used to having 4 hours to present. And so this is like you're getting the appetizers of what we can share today. So yes, nutrition. I'm a firm believer. Please eat regularly, hydrate, plan your meals, use your weekend, your time off to do the planning, to prepare for the week so that you're not caught in a position where you will choose some of these other things that just cause inflammation and more problems in your body. Rest and relaxation, yes, yes, yes to sleep. If you need any resources, just reach out through Summer or Kim, and I have lots of resources to share, techniques, ways to do visualization, certain types of meditations to help you get the sleep that you need. I love all these suggestions on here as well. And there's my pet therapy, emotional pet therapy. There's my baby. She literally looks like a Beanie Baby. Meet Molly. I call her Molly Dolly. She's maybe 4 pounds. And we include her because during the pandemic, Molly was, wanting me to pick her up. And so she would be on these national conferences for judges and different things. And everybody got used to seeing her, and she brings a smile. And so walking your pets, your dogs, petting cats, even if you need to volunteer somewhere or someone, they always bring so much joy. So I promote that for sure. We can go to the next. Bye, Molly. Intention setting. I wanted to do that with you. We can do it quickly to where we place, if you want, you can just place your hands on your thighs, sit up nice and tall and straight, and just close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Sigh it out. We would do 5 deep breaths. So keep doing that. And I'm going to keep walking you through it. I want you to start thinking about when you open your eyes in the morning, what is your intention for the day? Or what would be an affirmation, something positive? And it can be for you or for someone that might need some healing. It can be for your team, your community. It could be bigger than that, the collective, for humanity. So we find it in the mind, so we have it. And then if you want, you can place your hands on your heart. I'm a believer in feeling the body and that somatic response. It makes it more powerful. So as we close our eyes, we breathe in, we're thinking of that. Maybe the word is trust or love or forgiveness. Whatever it is, we're thinking it and we're pulling it into our heart. The important piece is to feel it. So now I want you to feel it, and we're going to breathe in, invite the breath in. Feel it going into the heart. You're thinking, you're feeling, you're doing the best you can. And we exhale and we release that intention. We release that positive energy, whether it's for ourselves or others, and it floats away. And then I always say, it's such a beautiful way to start your day. And then maybe you can think about it at your lunch hour. Oh yeah, my intention, I'm going to be more forgiving. Or trusting or loving. And then before you go to sleep at night, so then you put that intention, that whole practice to bed. It's just a great way. So I know I'm going quickly. So next, this next one I love a lot. It's called the harmonizing breath or alternate nostril breathing. It's another great one to fall asleep. It's one that I worked with the teenagers that were in the shelter during pandemic. It's 100 degrees here. I live in Reno, Nevada, and there's no air conditioning in some of these places. They're sleeping on cots. This is good for everybody. It's an immediate de-stressor, and you can read through all the different great things that it does when we're doing. We'll just do one round. So if you take your hand, your right hand, fold your 3 fingers, like hang loose. And if you can't, you can do peace fingers and just close the nostrils. Then you're going to turn your hand towards you. Your pinky finger is going to close the left nostril shut. And we're going to inhale slowly, only through the right side, as deep as we can, eventually to a count of 6. Inhale. At the top, pinch both nostrils shut. So now you're holding out the breath for 3. And then we like letting a valve open and letting the air out. Release through the left side, count of 6 or the best you can. At the bottom, hold it out. Now inhale, drink the breath in through the left side slowly. At the top, pinch, hold it out. And exhale out the right. Hold it out at the bottom. That's 1 revolution release. We would do 7 of those to really feel the deep effect of it, but I just wanted to introduce it to you. Conscious breathing, that's a lot of what I just said, is the 3-part 1, 2, 3, that breath we did in the beginning, and then this alternate nostril breathing. Great techniques. Go ahead. Oh, it's not moving. There. Grounding. Feet on the floor, uncross your legs. You want proper circulation. Feel the floor with your feet heavy. Feel your sit bones in the chair and sit away if you want from the back, or really lean into the chair. It's up to you. You're going to tuck your tail under, and then we're going to think about drawing the belly button in and up. Squeeze. And then come up the spine further. Pretend I'm putting a little marble between your shoulder blades. So now hold the marble, get your shoulder blades on your back where they belong, and relax your shoulders. That's really proper posture. You're going to notice, wow, I'm using a lot more energy than what I might be used to. Breathe in, breathe out. Very different from frumpiness, right? Now our lungs have the capacity to deepen the breath, which is so important because we're feeding oxygen to the brain. Okay, we can go to the next one. Sanctuary. This one is important. I feel it's really important to set your space, whether it's at home, in your car, at your office, at work, if you go to, like your desk space. You want to clean it. You want to create beautiful, welcoming energy. Sometimes, always, I running a diffuser with different essential oils. I like to keep everything wiped down and clean. Maybe something that brings me happiness, or a little sticky note reminder near my computer to sit up tall and straight, or set an intention, or take 5 deep breaths. Your space is really important. And I think keeping it positive is a really good thing. I do that with offices and different teams come through. Stand up, walk around, all important. Go ahead and go to the next. I would normally do a visualization, a guided. And this is all the practices, things that we can share, whether we're on Zoom or whether we're in person. Go ahead and go to the next one. And now it's on to Judge Reyes. Thank you, you guys.
When we're talking, just to close this out here in the next 3 minutes, this whole idea of creating support systems, I know that there's judicial networks, and there's also lawyer assistant networks that every state seems to have, and the importance of accessing those. If I will admit, that there is something going on with me, which is really, once again, the first step in what we do. When I used to isolate. I used to come home. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to make any decisions. Just, give me some space for a few minutes. And it really made matters worse. Sometimes we think that we're doing people a favor by not sharing things with our families. And I'm sure there are times we are, but we do need to create those kind of networks of support. So it's this whole idea of developing and keeping those contacts with everybody. And then offering that support to others. You know, if we're, you know, in a position of doing some practices means we do them all the time, because they're not practices, then they're just kind of like fireworks that we're just sending up every now and then to feel better. But I think this whole thing about developing these professional strategies in order to help our, you know, develop boundaries, have more balance, have a plan for coping. And we start these things from the first day that we're on the job. You know, we don't wait until we're like sitting in an emergency room, all hooked up to a bunch of things because I've been overwhelmed to put these things into practice. Once again, reflect on what's helping, share that with others, share it through the bar association, and make that commitment to yourself right immediately and start right now. This is a link to our Judicial Wellness Initiative. We do a Monday Morning Moments. They're free, and there's videos that are available that are free. Also, please, you know, feel free to reach out and contact us for more strategies. And for me, if you're an attorney or a judge, if you just want to talk to somebody, you know, we can make that happen. So thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate everybody's attention, and really appreciate everything that you're doing to help and serve your communities better.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.